When we hear the word hedonism, we usually picture relentless indulgence, a continuous loop of sensory input, feasts, and excesses. The philosopher Epicurus also believed pleasure was the ultimate goal of human life, but his version of hedonism looked radically different from the popular Cyrenaic idea of chasing constant thrills. Epicurus categorized the active pursuit and satisfaction of a desire, like eating a rich meal, as kinetic pleasure. While acceptable, he argued this was not the true goal. The ultimate objective is what he called katastamic, or static pleasure. This target state is known as ataraxia. Ataraxia is defined as the absolute absence of mental anxiety and physical pain. It is not an active high, but a condition of complete, unshakable tranquility. To reach ataraxia, a person cannot simply acquire more things. Instead, they must establish strict mathematical boundaries around what they actually need to survive physically and biologically. Once no longer hungry, thirsty, or cold, the body reaches a baseline state of satiety. For Epicurus, returning to this neutral, pain-free equilibrium naturally produces the maximum possible human pleasure. Any addition beyond this point only varies the pleasure. It does not increase its magnitude. Therefore, the pursuit of a good life requires doing the exact opposite of what most people attempt. You do not accumulate excess. You mathematically reduce your pain and your desires to absolute zero. To achieve this zero state, Epicurus developed a precise calculus of human desires. He divided all human impulses into two primary categories, those that are natural and those that are vain. Natural and necessary desires are biologically hardwired into us. They include basic hydration, the need for food, and basic shelter. Because they are tied directly to survival, they have built-in physical limits. Once you drink a glass of water, the desire is satisfied and the pain of thirst disappears. Vain and empty desires, on the other hand, are socially inculcated fictions. These include infinite wealth, endless political fame, or literal immortality. Because these concepts are abstract, they possess no natural limit. No matter how much fame or wealth a person acquires, they can always imagine having more. This structural inability to be satisfied ensures that the mind remains permanently perturbed, locked in a state of constant anxiety about losing what it has or failing to get what it wants next. To reach the peak of human pleasure, an individual must ruthlessly minimize the surface area of their desires. A philosophy dedicated entirely to the pursuit of pleasure must ultimately arrive at a lifestyle of severe minimalism, systematically eliminating every variable capable of causing distress. Even if a person manages to tame their physical desires, they still face two severe psychological threats to their peace: the fear of divine intervention and the belief that the universe operates according to a predetermined fate. Epicurus did not deny the existence of gods. However, he argued that any divine beings are simply localized atomic constructs existing in a state of supreme, undisturbed blessedness. According to his physical theory, these beings reside exclusively in the intermundia, the vast empty spaces between the various cosmoi, completely isolated from human reality. If a god were to monitor human affairs, judge actions, or administer punishments, they would have to experience anger, concern, and labor. By definition, these states are forms of perturbation. Engaging with humanity would immediately destroy the god's own perfect ataraxia. Earthquakes, lightning strikes, diseases, and good fortune are not signs of divine wrath or favor. They are the result of strictly mechanistic atomic interactions operating entirely without intent. By demonstrating that all observable events can be explained through the physics of atoms colliding in a void, Epicurus removed the necessity of purposeful design. There is no grand plan directing the cosmos. Because divine providence is a physical impossibility, the gods simply do not care about you. They cannot reward you, and they cannot punish you. With that realization, a massive source of human anxiety dissolves. To prove that the universe is entirely mechanical, Epicurus reduced all of reality to just two foundational properties. There are material bodies, indivisible atoms, and there is the void.
We know the void must exist through simple deduction. We can see with our own eyes that objects move. If reality were completely packed with solid matter, movement would be impossible. Therefore, empty space must exist to give matter room to travel. Earlier atomists, like Democritus, proposed that atoms fall infinitely downward through the void, driven by their own weight. Epicurus agreed with this premise, but identified a critical flaw in how it dictates reality. This diagram shows atoms falling through a vacuum at the exact same uniform velocity. Like raindrops in perfectly parallel lines, they never catch up to one another or intersect. Without collisions, atoms could never clump together to form macroscopic objects. To solve this, Epicurus introduced the clinomen, or the atomic swerve. Occasionally, an atom veers off its parallel path by a microscopic margin. This lateral shift occurs at random times and in random places. It is an uncaused physical anomaly, entirely independent of the inertia and collisions that preceded it. Because human beings are physical composites of atoms, this sub-perceptual randomness operates within the mechanics of the mind itself. By introducing a tiny margin of indeterminacy into the laws of physics, the swerve generates all complex matter and breaks the rigid chain of fate. Our capacity to make choices, our free will, emerges directly from the mechanical structure of the universe. With the gods neutralized and free will established, Epicurus turned to the final obstacle to tranquility, the nature of the soul. He formulated an identity theory of mind, arguing that the soul is not a spiritual essence, but a strictly physical organ. Epicurus located the rational part of the human soul in the chest. He deduced that it must be composed of exceptionally fine, smooth atoms, specifically particles of fire, air, wind, and a fourth, highly sensitive, nameless element. Because the soul is made of matter, it interacts physically with the rest of the body. When external objects emit films of atoms that strike our sense organs, these fine soul atoms are physically displaced. That mechanical displacement is what we experience as consciousness, thought, and sensation. This physical model carries an unavoidable consequence. Because the soul is a structural composite of atoms, it is entirely bound by the laws of thermodynamics and entropy. It requires the heavy, coarse atoms of the biological body to contain it and hold its delicate structure together. When disease or injury causes that biological container to fail, the fine atoms of the soul lose their housing. They instantly disperse into the surrounding air, drifting back into the void. Without the precise arrangement of those particles, sensation is physically impossible. Death is not a doorway to a spiritual afterlife or a realm of judgment. It is an event of absolute biological annihilation. Recognizing that death means annihilation allows us to understand Epicurus's most famous argument against the fear of mortality, the no subject of harm principle. The logic is straightforward. As long as you exist, death is not present, and when death finally arrives, you no longer exist. In order for something to be bad for you, you must be there to experience it. Suffering requires an active, conscious subject. Because the dead possess no sensory organs and no soul atoms to register pain, they cannot be harmed. Later Epicurean writers, like the Roman poet Lucretius, expanded this into the symmetry argument, asking us to look backward at the timeline of our own non-existence. Before you were born, an infinite expanse of time passed. You did not exist during the building of the pyramids, yet that infinite abyss of past non-existence causes you no dread today. The time after your death is exactly the same void. Since the eternity before your birth inflicted no suffering and caused no anxiety, there is no logical reason to fear the identical eternity that follows your life. Nature holds up a mirror from the past to show us our future. By accepting the reality of absolute physical annihilation, we strip death of its power to terrify us. Letting go of the demand for immortality grants ultimate psychological freedom, leaving the mind in the perfect, undisturbed stillness of pure blackness.